Welcome to the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare, the podcast for busy healthcare leaders who are ready to get out of survival mode so they can focus on what matters most. This is where the burnout stops and the real talk starts. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Carter, and each week I sit down with healthcare innovators who get it. We will unpack the chaos, laugh through the hard stuff, and get you at least 2 practical tips you can use at work right away. If you're ready to clear the chaos and lead with impact, you've come to the right place. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare, the podcast for busy healthcare leaders who are done with overwhelming workloads and burnout. This podcast is built around the big idea that you are not meant to prove your worth through exhaustion. We help you get out of survival mode by discussing your real-world pain points and giving you at least 2 practical tips you can put in place right away. Today's guest is the incredible Dr. Renee Thompson. She probably does not need a formal introduction because she's a literal legend in our industry, but for the sake of consistency, let's give her one anyway. Dr. Renee Thompson is the CEO and founder of the Healthy Workforce Institute, and she works with healthcare organizations to cultivate a professional workforce by addressing bullying and incivility. Renee has authored several books and is one of only 30 nurses in the world who have achieved the prestigious Certified Speaking Professional designation. In 2022, Renee was inducted as a Fellow of the American Academy of Nursing for her work to eradicate disruptive behaviors in healthcare. Renee and her team are on a mission to create a world where bullying and incivility are immediately rejected and kindness, respect, and professionalism become the new norm. I am beyond thrilled to get some time to learn from this exceptional nurse leader and entrepreneur. She's appeared on stage at several of the conferences I attend, and despite this level of fame, she is still one of the most authentic and kind nurse leaders I've had the pleasure of meeting. So welcome to the show, Renee.
Goodness, I don't usually blush, but I feel like I'm blushing right now. That was so kind of you. That was such a lovely welcome and introduction. And Megan, just really happy to be here. Love the work that you're doing. I wish you were doing this for, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, when I'm probably need the most. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Thank you so much. That's so kind. And all of those accolades, so well deserved. You've done so much in our industry. And I'm literally geeking out right now because if you can't already tell, I'm a huge fan of you and your work. And I actually remember the first time I heard about your work because at that time in my career, I was being mercilessly bullied by a leader at my organization. And you said something that has stuck with me ever since. You said that silence is how this kind of behavior thrives. And after I heard your inspiring message, I actually took home the courage to stand up for myself for the first time in my career. And I cannot thank you enough for helping me find the courage to do that.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing that. I will be, because you said I'm authentic. I am. I'm real. I will tell you good, not good. There are days I really struggle because this work is so hard. You're dealing with bad behavior. And I think, oh my gosh, am I really making a difference when I'm just bombarded with meanness? And it's when people tell me that there's something that I said or something that they read that they've actually then they took action. That's what keeps me doing this work because as you can imagine, it's not easy.
It's not. When we're supporting people who are feeling broken and overwhelmed or at a critical tipping point. But as nurses, I think we're naturally wired to be the person to step in and help support them because that's just part of who we are as nurses, which I love. One of the first questions I like to ask our guests helps the listeners understand your experience with healthcare leadership. So before we get into the specifics of bullying and incivility, can you share with the listeners what has been one of your most chaotic moments in healthcare leadership?
Gosh, that's easy. So this is what drives what I do today. I found myself a brand new leader. So it was my first leadership role. I was new to leadership, new to an organization. Okay. And within 2 weeks, I found out that I was now the manager of a department that had the worst reputation in the entire 700-bed organization, and I was the sixth manager in 6 years. I had never seen such toxic behaviors in my entire life, even to this day. Megan, it was so bad that I actually thought people were like playing a joke on me. People can't really treat each other that way, and they did. The issue was I had no idea how to address it. And I tried and I did things that I thought would be helpful, and they weren't. They backfired. And after 14 months, I became manager number 7.
Yeah.
I quit.
Yeah.
And when you said chaotic, that was my first, like, it went immediately back to those days when I struggled. I felt like every single day I would just put out fire after fire. People were in my office complaining about each other. And I remember feeling this constant, like I was on the verge of a panic attack every day. And actually, one time I'd call my sister. So I was living in Pittsburgh at the time. My sister's a nurse in California, and I would call her and I would talk to her on the way home. And one time, I don't even remember driving. I don't remember talking to her. And she's screaming on the phone, pull over, pull over. I think I had like a mental break. And I ended up getting divorced while I was in that role, which was in retrospect a blessing. Okay. It was like, I was like Al Pacino, you're out of order. You're out of, everyone's out of order. Like, I'm done. Bottom. But I quit everything. Okay?
Yeah.
I felt like a failure for such a long time until I got older and wiser and realized I'm not a failure. I just wasn't equipped. And so one of the things that drives me is making sure that other leaders don't feel like a failure like I did. And so, but it was beyond chaotic. I've never experienced that in my life, and God willing, I never will again.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that incredible story. And you're right, the feeling afterwards. I didn't have the exact same story, but as a brand new nurse manager, I inherited a department that was being changed so quickly, and no one gave me heads up. And so it ended up, there was a lot of turmoil and there was a lot of bullying and incivility. And it's so sad when we know we're not the only ones who feel this way, right? We're not the only ones who struggle with this. 14 months is a long time, Renee, for you to have stuck it out. Good for you for leaving. But I know that feeling of shame after we feel like such a failure, but it's deeply unfair to ourselves to feel like a failure because our healthcare system currently, as the way it's built, and it's not intentional by any one person when I say this, but it's built to continue the way it always has. It is built to ask nurse leaders and other healthcare leaders to burn the candle at both ends because no one teaches us how to do it differently. So I love that you took that struggle, and that's what inspired you to become an entrepreneur and do this full time. And you've been doing this now, Healthy Workforce Institute, for 14 years?
14 years.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
No, it's funny because, when I first started the company and I was just doing some speaking, I was still teaching a lot, because I needed to have an income. And to, kind of think forward, I would have never thought that I'd be at this point 14 years later with an institute. There were 16 of us on my team, including me. It's been a remarkable journey full of ups and downs, but it's helping the leaders and their teams who really need the help, and seeing that transformation makes everything worth it.
I love that. Well, and there's such a need for it. And it's sad, but it's good that you're here to do it because it really does surprise a lot of people outside of healthcare to hear the statistics around incivility and bullying in our industry specifically. So for those who are listening who may not be aware, why is there such a high prevalence of incivility and bullying in nursing?
Yeah, well, it's sad, but we see more disruptive behaviors in healthcare than in any other industry. And I ask my audience all the time, why do you think that is? They get the answer right every time. Stress. We see more stress in healthcare than in any other industry. I mean, you never know what you're going to get when you walk in the door. You add a global pandemic into the mix while everybody else is running out of the burning building. We're running into the burning building. And let's face it, when people are burned out and stressed out, they lash out. Who do they lash out to? It's to each other. And then, we have the issue where we normalize deviant behaviors to the point where we don't even notice it. And we've all heard this. They're a great nurse, but great physician, but we justify people's deviant behaviors to the point where we don't even notice them. And there's a hierarchy that we see that's pretty steep. And it's not having a hierarchy that's an issue. It's when someone uses their title, their role as license to kind of squash somebody else. So there's lots of reasons. We're a female dominated profession in nursing.
Right.
Let's face it, Megan,
Yep.
we're not always that nice to each other.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
lots of reasons why it's so prevalent, but I'm hoping people recognize that saying, well, that's just the way it's always been is not acceptable anymore. And we have the opportunity to change it.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's what we're trying to do is help people change that.
I love that. I love that. And I know too, this isn't just specific to the direct care clinicians either. This happens at the leadership level. At one point in time, I was truly under the impression that the bullying and incivility was just happening in these direct care roles. I didn't expect to experience it by my peers as a nurse leader, but sure enough, I experienced it as a new nurse manager. I experienced it as a director and even as a hospital executive. And the names and faces changed, but the pattern of behaviors were almost identical. And it turns out I'm not alone in that experience. When I shared part of my story, on another podcast, it shocked me how many nurse leaders reached out after that episode to say, me too. And this has been going on for years. And the big commonality is, I don't know what to do. So for the
Yeah.
healthcare leaders who might be experiencing some of those harmful behaviors, can you help them understand first what is the difference between incivility and bullying?
Sure. I'll tell you one thing before I answer that question. I am currently writing an article about leader to leader bullying because it keeps bubbling up to the surface. We do quick little surveys. I talk to leaders every day, and it's not necessarily the team members, their employees, but it's their peers. So that'll be coming. I don't know when, but yeah, I think one of the reasons why bullying and incivility continue is because we're not clear on what it is. We call all bad behavior bullying, and that's not accurate. Just to make it easy and not spend an hour talking about this, the difference for a behavior to be considered bullying, there has to be a target, behavior has to be harmful, and it has to be repeated over time. So it can't just be one time I get testy with you, Megan, in a crisis situation. Or I'm having a really bad day and I kind of lash out. That's not bullying. Things like conflict's not bullying. Getting constructive feedback's not bullying. Having your boss hold you accountable for your performance is not bullying. But we tend to call those things bullying. But there has to be a target. The behavior has to be harmful and has to be repeated. We go into a lot of organizations and I would say we do a deep dive. We pull back the covers and lift up the gown. We actually don't see a lot of bullying. I mean, it's there, but it's not as prevalent as you think. What we do see is an awful lot of incivility. And incivility is that low level, inconsiderate, rude behaviors. It's, I help the people I like. I don't help the people I don't like. And it's funny because what we find is way more incivility, and incivility is culture. It's the behaviors that you tolerate, the behaviors that you recognize, the behaviors that are just, generally accepted by people. And if you're not careful, it's those behaviors that then really create a culture where people don't want to work there anymore and they leave.
Right.
But bullying is different. So
Right.
when people say, oh, my patient is bullying me, no, they're not.
Right.
They're being uncivil to you. They're being aggressive or abrasive or abusive. But unless that patient's there for 6 months, or 3 months, and sometimes that happens,
Right.
that's not bullying. So I'm hoping that's helpful to your listeners to kind of get clear on what it is and what it's not.
Yeah, I think it's helpful because just like with a diagnosis, right? It's helpful to know root cause and naming the behavior that's happening. It helps us in the treatment or the intervention itself. I know in chapter 10 of your newly revised book, Renee just released a new book, you guys. It's called Enough with an exclamation point.
Yep.
Eradicate bullying and incivility in healthcare strategies for frontline leaders. In chapter 10, Renee, you discuss the changing landscape of healthcare leadership. And I loved reading it because it says it had so many insights for me. And you mentioned in there that over half of today's frontline leaders have less than 2 years experience,
Mhm.
which means they transitioned to that role during the pandemic, which means they probably didn't get a lot of leadership development or training. And so it's no wonder it can feel like a struggle for many of them. What I found most compelling, though, was your emphasis on a critical leadership skill called lateral agility.
Yeah,
So for the listeners, can you help us understand what is lateral agility and how does it support what you call a partner mindset?
sure. We all know healthcare is still so siloed. Physicians do their thing, nurses do their thing. You have the administrators. Everybody kind of learns in a silo. They even congregate in silos. So we're working with a group right now. They still have their physicians, charting documentation room and their nurses. But yet, we're supposed to come together as an interprofessional team and collaborate for when we think about solving issues, when we think about delivering the highest quality patient care, it takes a team. So lateral agility is more of a mindset that helps break down those silos. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We know right now that a lot of organizations are looking at bullying, and they're bringing nurses together to solve this bullying and incivility problem. Bullying and incivility is not a nursing issue. It's a human issue. So the best groups who are actually solving this issue are bringing in an interprofessional team, people at the bedside, physicians, respiratory, pharmacy, therapists, administrators, nurse leaders. It's the interprofessional team. So when you think about having that partner mindset, the first thing that I teach leaders to do is when an issue is presented in front of them, what we tend to do is think, oh my gosh, how am I going to solve this? That's our first, like we're the problem solvers. And instead, to adopt that partner mindset is to ask, who can help me solve this problem? Who is better? Who is involved in this? And it might not just be the people in your department or your leadership team. It might be pharmacy, somebody from pharmacy or EVS or some other group. I did an interview on my podcast with Dr. Stacy Albus, and she was sharing how, ED throughput, it's always an issue. Throughput is always an issue in the ED.
Please.
And they had been working on this for years until somebody said, wait a minute, the people who you have working on this issue aren't the ones who are actually involved in the issue. And what they did was they grabbed a couple of bedside nurses who worked in the ED, somebody from transport. I can't remember who else and the issue was solved like in 2 weeks. So it's always having that partnership mindset from a issue resolution perspective, but then also from a learning and a relationship building perspective. So what can you do to learn together, to build relationships with each other? Because that's what the leaders need to do today, considering today's evolving workforce and how they can decrease some of that burden on themselves because we take everything on ourselves. Yeah. Instead, who can help me? And it's funny. Do I have this here? Yeah. I have an index card to remind me who, not how.
Yeah.
Like who can help me solve
that.
this issue? It's just a reminder for me.
That's beautiful too. We can't, I feel like we're also hardwired again. We're in an industry where we just help, and so we have to unlearn some of that or evolve how we view that. When I put my leader hat on and I think about, I'm picturing like a leadership team. So let's say it's a group of managers and directors, right? They're reporting up to the senior leadership team. Thinking of lateral agility and this partner mindset. When I was reading that section of that chapter, I was thinking about my experience with some of the bullying, or not really bullying, but the true incivility that was happening even amongst these high level leaders. And clearly they lacked that partner mindset. They lacked that lateral agility. So if I'm a senior nurse executive or a senior hospital executive, and I want to promote lateral agility and partner mindset in that leadership team, any suggestions or strategies for me?
A simple strategy. You have to create opportunities for people who have different roles to come together. So I'll give you an example. I had a nursing director and the medical director of a NICU. reach out to me because they were really struggling with the relationship between the physicians and nurses. Okay. And they wanted my help. And just through a series of questions, I ended up asking them, well, tell me about your meeting structure. How often do you meet with your teams? And what I learned was that the physicians and nurses never meet together. There's not one meeting in their NICU that they come together to talk about caring for these babies. When I so you don't ever meet together. You're telling me that you have a relationship issue. And it was funny just to see like the light bulb moment go off in my head. They're like, we should meet together. Hello. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, because I know people are so stretched so thin. It's hard to meet. We were working with, oh my gosh, it was a NICU. We spent a lot of time in maternal child health. And we formed an interprofessional team. This is what we always do when we go in to do consulting. We form a team of interprofessional champions. And the key for them is communication dissemination to their peers and issue resolution. So we were talking about this whole, how do we create space for the nurses and physicians to come together? And the physicians had this quarterly meeting. It was a quality meeting. And we decided, let's start there, that they were going to protect 30 minutes of that 90-minute meeting to have the nurses join them so that they can talk about common issues or, common things. And it was a start. It was one quarterly meeting, but it was a start. And now they've hardwired that. And now they have other opportunities where they're meeting together. But you have to learn together. You have to debrief together, especially after a critical incident. They have to spend time communicating with each other.
That's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great example. And it's funny, as you were saying that, it's so clear to you and I hearing it and looking at it from the outside, but it just illustrates when you're the one closest to the work or to the issue. That's why that outside view is so valuable in seeking help, because you're too close to it. And the way you described it almost sounds like someone's in a relationship. They haven't even gone on a date yet. They haven't even spent any time. Of course, the relationship doesn't exist, or it's strained at best, right? I love that. So I'll take that one step further. So for any listener specifically, I want to talk to this listener. If they themselves are dealing with bullying or incivility by peer leaders, what are some practical strategies you might share with them in this moment?
Yes. I'm going to give some recommendations. However, people have to decide whether or not they're willing to do this. Okay. Because I always say, there are some people like, I'm not going to die on that hill. Okay. But I'm always going to tell you what you could do. Because that's what I always think. Okay. I'm going to tell you, well, maybe I'll actually say it this way. Here's what you should do. But I'm going to ask you after you hear this, okay, what am I willing to do? What can I do? Okay, because sometimes they're two different things. You need to sit down with that leader and have an honest conversation with them. Can't be after, like, when your emotions are high. Let's say there's some behavior at a meeting, threw you under the bus again. It can't be right after that, but it has to be within 72 hours of that incident. Okay, because you don't want your emotions to be high. But here's what I would do. Ask to meet for coffee. Sit down and say, I want to talk to you about something that happened. It's uncomfortable for me bringing it up, and it might make you uncomfortable. But if the situation were reversed, I'd want you to tell me. Okay, you can say that. You can also say, the relationship I have with you is important to me. If that's true. If it's not true, don't say that. Don't lie. Okay. The relationship I have with you is important to our team, to our departments, our service line. Okay. Find a way to just basically say, hey, our relationship and how people see us, it's important. I want to talk to you about what happened, and then name the behavior, name what actually happened. You have to be careful, though, not to pull in any drama, any assumptions, anything that isn't really objective. It's way easier to do this, Megan, if there are overt behaviors, interrupting. It's so interesting. So people, as a nurse, people reach out to you with all their medical ailments, like your neighbors, your family.
Yes.
Okay, well, my neighbors and my families reach out to me now with the medical questions. And I have this coworker, and not in healthcare, So I had my aunt, she was telling me about her boss and how she feels like her boss is setting her up for failure. She gave me some examples. And then she went off on this tangent about, oh yeah, and she and this other girl, they take an hour and a half break together and they're on and she comes in late and they're so I'm like, all right, here's the deal. That's all drama. Keep it out of the conversation.
Yeah.
And then I asked her some questions. How is this affecting your work? Is it? She's like, yes, it is. Okay, walk me through how it's affecting your work. And I said, that's the conversation you have with her. When you don't include, so you didn't include me in this meeting. This is the third time that this has happened. When you don't include me in this meeting, it affects my ability to do my job. Is there a reason you're not you just have to be clear and objective. Because I said, if you go at it from you take breaks with so and so, and I know you're going to lose your credibility. So it's be focused, be objective. But I would have an honest conversation with them. If, like I said, there's some people, let's just say you're like, no way am I going to do that. Then start a documentation trail and start documenting your experiences with them because you might need it at some point.
Right. Absolutely. That's so valuable. And it's similar advice that we heard in a previous episode where we were talking about toxic leadership. So I had Dan Weberg on and we were talking about, if your own leader, it's a sensitive, high stakes thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a power differential there. I love the advice you gave. So what I heard for the listeners is you name it, recognize it. Is it incivility? Is it bullying? And then attempt at least a conversation eye to eye, peer to peer, one-on-one with this person. If you feel safe and comfortable enough to do so, we're naming the behavior and how it impacts you. We're not including that anecdotes that include drama and noise, which is so valuable. The long story short of my experience, I think I stumbled on this wisdom on accident, came out of desperation. So my peer director was absolutely incivil and had started targeting bullying me. I made 3 attempts to meet with her. So I put myself on her calendar. She called in sick one day. She canceled the second. The third, she was a no-show. Tried going through her admin assistant, wouldn't show up. So finally, Renee, I just surprised her one day and I went into her office. I knocked on the door, walked in, sat down quietly, shut the door. And the look on her face was priceless. She's like, oh my gosh. I didn't want her to feel cornered. But so I didn't ask her to come to my office. I went to her. And of course, I'm shaking and sweating the entire time. And I just asked a simple question. I just said, do you not like me? And she looked at me for the longest time and the wheels were turning. And she goes, no, I don't. And I said, thank you for saying that out loud. It's not just in my head because I'm over here thinking that I'm thinking. So I said, thank you. And her shoulders literally relaxed, like her whole body just relaxed. And I said, exactly what you said. Here's the thing. People see you rolling your eyes at me. I don't know if that's your intention. I'm trying to give grace, right? But the nurse managers are talking about it. It's really distracting. And I know you and I care deeply about our teams and about these patients. So what can we do? Is there anything I've said or done that I can control that affects how you feel about me? And she goes, no. She goes, it's just because you're new, you're from the outside. That's not how we do things here. She explained it all. So at the end, we left, parted ways respectfully. We were never buddies, but she, the behavior stopped. And I remember leaving her office feeling like my whole body just wanted to shut down. Like my sympathetic nervous system was just like, oh, no. So scary, but so, so worth it. So I highly encourage people to take Renee's advice. And if this is keeping you up at night, if it's really bothering you, it's worth the conversation, you guys. So thank you for that, Renee. It was great.
100%. Oh my God, I got goosebumps when you shared that.
Yeah, it was wild. It was wild. Yeah, I had to take you down.
Yeah, for her to admit.
Yeah, which I appreciate honesty. Like it's not in my head. I'm not making up a story.
And I love that. Thank you. Yeah. I'm not crazy. Because, the whole gaslighting, is it me? Is it and people can be so manipulative and intentional. And those are people, that's a character flaw.
Yeah.
You don't want somebody like that working in your organization. Thank goodness most people aren't like that.
For sure.
Majority of people, if you just sit down and have an honest conversation with them, you can resolve it.
Right.
But the key is, as you said early on, we have to stop using silence as a strategy because it does not work.
Right. Yep. It's clearly not been working. One other question too, from a leadership perspective, Renee, if you have an opinion on this, is so if I'm a senior executive at a healthcare organization, it always amazes me how little they're aware that these dynamics are even happening within their own leadership team. They just assume because they're leaders that they're on their best behavior or they'll just figure it out themselves. So if you've got this happening on your leadership team, how can you as the senior executive leader continue to have a pulse check and create psychological safety so people feel comfortable telling you if this is happening? Because not everybody wants to go running to the CEO or CNO and tell them what's going on. But as an executive, you need to know if this is happening. So any thoughts on how to make sure you're in tune with what's happening on your leadership team for those dynamics?
Yeah. I will tell you, it's not one thing. It's
Right.
several things. So of course we focus on our staff members, our nurses, our support staff, and we survey them all over the place. We're not always doing the same with our leadership team. So there are several surveys. We have some surveys out there to survey your leadership team to kind of get a pulse check on the culture among your leaders. Okay. The leadership team. There's also having just some one-on-ones. I know we get hired to come in and do some focus groups and do assessments because this is what I know, Megan. They won't tell you, but they'll tell us everything.
There you go. Yeah.
And been many times where we've gone in and said, "Ooh, you got a problem here." And it's a problem that they didn't even realize that they had because how's everything going? Fine. No, everything is great because especially leaders, they don't want to show any signs of incompetence or vulnerability, especially to their executives. I don't know why we have to, we think we have to be perfect all the time and we're not. So we don't admit when we're having a problem. And so there's also another way I look at, you want to try to gather information, of course, but then at your leadership team meetings, okay, so when you look at your leadership team, I would, and this is what we do with our clients, add healthy workforce as a standing agenda item at every meeting because it gives you permission and space to talk about it. So you can talk about gossip and not from is your team gossiping about each other? Is there triangulation? Is there passive aggressive covert behaviors? No, it's let's talk about this as a leadership team.
Yeah. I love
Because
that.
the leaders are the role models and you have to equip them. We have a framework. It's our healthy workforce culture framework. You have to strengthen your organization, equip your leaders, and empower your teams. So you have to, from a systems perspective, that's the strength in the organization, keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with your entire team, leadership, physicians, providers, team members, everyone. And there's a lot that goes into that, but you have to make sure you're equipping your leaders with the skills and tools that they need to actually address disruptive behaviors, regardless if it's their employees or the manager in the sister department or their director or their assistant nurse manager. You have to equip them because if you don't, they won't have the language to be able to address it on their own. And these are the ones who end up leaving.
Absolutely.
So being an executive who keeps their finger on the pulse of what's happening, adds healthy workforce as a standing agenda item so that they have an opportunity to discuss behaviors and then equips them with the knowledge, skills, and tools that they need.
Love that. Love that. And I would think too, it's a pivotal moment if you start adding that agenda item the first time someone does bring it up. In that moment is a very important tone setting moment for you as the executive leader. How you respond to that is going to make or break whether that team continues to feel comfortable bringing it up. So just something to think about for our executive colleagues that are listening is one, acknowledge it is possible your leadership team, as wonderful as they are, they might have these dynamics going on, and it is possible you're not aware because they want you to see them as perfect and polished. So I love that you give that advice, Renee, to create intentional space where if it is happening, they do feel supported to bring it up. Absolutely. So since we're all about working smarter, not harder here on the podcast, are there any other Chaos Whisperer leadership tips you want to share with the listeners before we close out?
Talk about chaos. So I tend to gravitate towards chaos. I create chaos. If my life is nice and calm, I will add things on it because it's too calm. Okay. I've read everything you can read on productivity. Check email in the morning. Don't check email in the morning. Taken every productivity course. And yet at the end of every day, I still find that there's so many things on my list that I just didn't get done. It's funny because I read a book recently called Never Not Working. And,
You read that?
it was like, yep, that's me, that's me, that's me. And, the whole creating chaos in my life and it taking me away from my my family. I have grandkids, my friends. And so I've gotten really good at getting clear on what my priorities are. So, and I'm looking over, I have a big whiteboard. So I have a quarterly, I picked, so the power of 3. Your brain loves the number 3. I picked 3 big goals for the quarter. I have 3 goals for this week and 3 goals for today. One of my goals today, I'm doing 3 podcasts, so it's prepping for my podcast. So I make sure that I do those priorities first. And then if I have room later on, I do some of the other things. But I make it clear, even though I might write a list of 10 things that I want to get done, I make sure I know what my top 3 priorities are. And if I can get those done, then I feel accomplished and I feel that I've made progress. And so when I see leaders go into their workday thinking they're going to get all these things done, it's just not possible. So get really clear on what your priorities are and just pick 3 to start with. Once you're done with those 3, then if you can, pick 3 more.
The rest is bonus. And I love that. That's so in alignment with what I teach too. And for me, the power was, to your point, if I can get that bare minimum, those 3 or those 4, whatever it is, I can actually sleep at night. I can disconnect my brain from work and actually be present at home with my family. So thank you for that beautiful advice. Love that. And we also know, I always ask the guests this before we leave. We know work is obviously a big part of our lives, but it's not our whole experience, to your point. And we all need to be able to experience joy and laughter even outside of work. So where are you going, Renee, to get laughter in your life right now?
I mentioned my grandkids. So I have a 4-year-old grandson and a 7-year-old granddaughter. And my grandson, Lucas, is the goofiest kid. Like he just wants to make people laugh. And Olivia, she's at the age where like we're playing cards with her a lot. So we taught her how to play Uno.
Yeah.
And live close to each other. They're in Raleigh, we're in Tampa, but we go there probably like once every 6 weeks. And just this last time we went, spent a couple of days with them. We're playing Uno with her. And when she didn't get the card she wanted, she yelled out, "Biscuits." Oh my gosh, we were cracking up so bad. So
that's the cutest for sure.
And yeah. I guess, they're in the South. But I said to my daughter, I'm like, where did Olivia get biscuits? Because I thought maybe, from her husband, because he's from that area. She's not. And she's like, she came home from school with that. But the things that they say, the goofiness, the playing with them, it's like being a kid again. So that's my happy place. And, they bring me joy and make me laugh.
I saw that little video clip you shared on LinkedIn. I think it was with your granddaughter. You were in front of, I think, a green screen, and she was just living her best life. I mean, spinning. I mean, you could see the light up in your eyes, Renee. So it's clear they bring you joy. That was so precious.
Yeah, they're great.
Well, and as we close too, if our listeners do want to connect with you further, Renee, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn all the time, Megan, as you know. They can email me, Renee at healthyworkforceinstitute.com, or they can contact me through my website, which is healthyworkforceinstitute.com.
Perfect. Well, Renee, thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share so much wisdom with us. You are the ultimate culture chaos whisperer, and I'm so grateful for the difference you made in my life and the difference you continue to make for all healthcare leaders across the country. And thank you for tuning in, our sweet listeners. Each of Renee's strategies and tips, you can find it in our show notes if you just click down there. And make sure you get a copy of her new book, Enough: Eradicating Bullying and Incivility. So cheers to each and every one of you Chaos Whisperers. Until next time.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us on the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare. If today's episode resonated with you, please be sure to follow this podcast, rate, and leave a review on your favorite platform. I'm Dr. Megan Carter, and I will be back next week with more real talk, fresh strategies, and guests who are redefining what it means to lead with impact. Want to keep the conversation going? Be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and download free tools and resources from my website. Both links are in the show notes. Let's heal this broken healthcare system together, one day at a time.